Welcome to Treon's Realm. With all the hype going on around the Switch 2 right now, I figure it'd be a good time to talk about what seems to be confusing a lot of people, and that is the Nintendo Switch 2 game keycard. A lot of people are making a big stink about it, and I don't think people have really taken the time to think through what this is, because in reality, the game keycard has been something we've been dealing with for, Jesus, 8 years minimum at this point. Throughout the entirety of the Nintendo Switch 1 generation, there are many games that use this. Hell, I've covered them extensively on my channel. The problem is that they were never clearly marked, and this confused people, it upset people, but it never got full through to the mainstream, and as a result, a lot of people didn't realize it was as big a problem as it really was. To make it clear, when it came to the Switch 1, Nintendo did attempt to have companies list and state, and be upfront about what it was that the game required, what was actually on a cart, whether it required a download. There were a lot of different factors that came into play. This all extended to games that had the dreaded blue and white banner that would show up on them. Now, the problem is that there was no standardization of this. So you could have some games that would clearly state it on the front. You could have some games that would put it on the back, some games that would use fine print, some games that would say it was a full code download and no game cart included, which meant that it was essentially a code in a box, or as we like to call it, fake physical. A lot of this came from the fact that many bigger third-party companies wanted to cut costs in every way possible. So what this resulted in is them using smaller cartridges, say 2 or 4 gigs, when their game in reality may have required, say, 16, 32, or even a larger size than what was available cartridge-wise. So their option was to put it out on a smaller cartridge, tie the download of the game to the cartridge, and then dump the additional cost onto the customer. And because there were no set requirements from Nintendo on this front, it seemed to be that Nintendo would require them to state it, but there was never a uniform way of stating it. And I would not be surprised if Nintendo's customer service got calls from upset customers about this. But by the time that it had grown into a large enough problem, it would have been confusing to the customers to suddenly go back to old Switch games and put out new standardized versions for them that had this disclaimer on the box in a very specific way. Now, I want to give credit where credit's due. There were a lot of smaller third-party companies that did try and put the full game on the cartridge. With the exception of maybe post-release patches to address small issues, these companies tried to actually do things correctly. This includes Nintendo themselves, who often tried to put as much of the game as possible on the cartridge, and would even go as far as releasing revised cartridges as patches and stuff came out, where they would put those later patches onto the newer cartridges. On the flip side, there were many big third parties that cut corners in order to put out large games on the system, but they wanted the shelf space, they wanted to be able to put out what looked like a physical product to make sure that the customers knew about their games. Now, many would argue, well, why wouldn't they just put out the games digital only? What a lot of people don't realize is that in reality, there's over 12,000 games on the Nintendo Switch. And all of those games are vying for a spot on their eShop. Now, the big third parties, they did not want to have to deal with that because they knew that their games would get lost in the shuffle. And despite people claiming that physical games are going away, there are still plenty of people and a lot of the customer base that go into stores and see games on the walls and will buy based on what they see. To give an example, I have run into many parents who go to buy games for their kids who ask for a physical version of Fortnite, not realizing that that is a digital-only game. This in turn is why you will see companies like Epic put out a fake physical version that has a DLC code for, say, a skin or something, just so that they have the shelf space showing that, oh, I can buy my kids something for Fortnite in the game. So this brings me all the way back to where I started with the Nintendo Switch 2 game keycard. I think what we're seeing here is Nintendo, because they're starting a new console cycle, they are creating a standardized way to inform the customer of what they are buying. This does not automatically mean that all games are going to be digital or they're going to be tied into this key code. Nintendo themselves and plenty of third parties will still release their games fully on cartridge, or as fully on cartridge as possible at launch. But this gives third parties an option to make a quote-unquote physical version at a lower cost, while at the same time letting the customer know that that is in fact what they are buying. And for those confused, it's going to come down to the major third parties, just like it did on the Switch 1. Many of the bigger third-party companies will take advantage of this. So, for example, Capcom, Ubisoft, Warner Brothers, Microsoft, Sony, and yes, those last two do put out games on the Nintendo Switch and will in turn put it out on the Switch too. They are more likely to put their games out on a game key card as opposed to a proper physical release. Now, I know I went a little overboard explaining this, but in personal experience, I find that if you come out and are upfront with the customer, it'll make things much easier on them in terms of understanding what it is that they are buying. In recent years, I have noticed that the average US customer has become highly uneducated when it comes to what they buy, whether it be from busy life, whether it be from rushing to do something, or just not critically thinking what it is that they are buying. Companies have taken advantage of this. I have witnessed it all throughout the Switch 1 generation, and it has been quite disgusting. Also, to be clear, this is not a defense of Nintendo. Personally, I think that they should put requirements on companies that if they can put the game physically on a Switch 2, then they should be required to use the proper cartridge size if available. But this seems to be a bit of a half step or a compromise so that those companies can get their games on there. Now, also, while it should be noted that while this could be considered a small win or loss depending on which side you lean on, this at least leans towards giving a greater degree of ownership for the customer on a digital good. Meaning that if you have this game key card, you will be able to trade or sell back to a secondhand store for as long as those games are supported. Something that cannot be done in any way with current digital-only games. Now, according to Nintendo's own website, game key cards are different from regular game cards because they don't contain the full game data. As I said earlier, this was the same way that many Switch 1 games operated. Games like Borderlands 3 and BioShock on the Nintendo Switch is exactly the same type of thing as the Switch 2 game key card. Personally, much like the Switch, I plan to only be buying games that are properly done physically, but I also feel that Nintendo forcing companies to be more upfront about what it is that they're selling to the customer is a good thing. I'm hoping that this helps straighten things out and makes it a little bit easier to understand what is exactly happening as we move into the Switch 2 generation. How do you feel about the Switch 2 game key cards? Will you be buying games this way, or like myself, will you be sticking to only proper physical releases? Let us know in the comments down below. If this video helped you and you'd like to see more, please subscribe and hit that like button. Thank you for watching, and I'll talk to you later.